There we go.
There we go. All right, go ahead, Michelle.
All right, welcome back from break, everyone. And remember to keep dropping comments and questions into the chat as you think of them. Next up, we're going to hear from Jim Bokern, President of the Manitowish Waters Historical Society, and Brad Casselberry, University Archivist at UW Stevens Point. Jim Bokern taught high school American history during his 34-year career as an educator. He completed his master's degree in history at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in 1987. Bokern also has led 2 archaeological surveys on the Manitowish Waters chain of lakes and co-developed the Digital Time Traveler program at the North Lakeland Discovery Center, digitally archiving numerous historic documents. Brad Casselberry received a Bachelor of Arts in History from UW Stevens Point and a Master's in Library and Information Science with an Archives concentration from UW Milwaukee. He has worked at the UW Stevens Point Archive since 2010, originally as a volunteer, and worked up to becoming the university archivist. He currently lives in Amherst with his wife Diane, son Alex, and 2 cats. Welcome, Jim and Brad.
Okay, I guess we're getting started here. This is Jim Bokern, and Brad and I are going to share with you several topics that we think are kind of important that are coming from the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. I'm a recent member of the Forest History Association of Wisconsin and immediately was pulled into their archival and educational outreach. And Joe saw that as an opportunity to share what we're doing in trying to bring images like you see on the first slide of Jack Vilas's famous flight over Trout Lake, and key resources like the 4-H getting involved in forestry stewardship. So we're going to first kick off with looking at Brad Casselberry's awesome work at the UW Stevens Point in developing archives specifically for the Forest History Association of Wisconsin and some of the connections we're going to be making. Then I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about National History Day and outreach through UW La Crosse that we're exploring right now that is truly exciting and probably would be something that other history groups might be interested in engaging in. We'll talk also, both Brad and I, about the power of linking to existing archives and some cautionary tales of not researching what's out there already when you're archiving. And we also both use interns that have been very helpful in us advancing our goals, and then we'll wrap it up. So that's where we are. It's my pleasure to introduce Brad Casselberry, who will move us forward.
Thank you. Let me say it's great to be here, and I'm going to start by talking about the Forest History Association of Wisconsin's records at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point Archives. We have been one of their repositories for about 20 years, and over that time we've held a small portion of their records, only about 6 archive boxes, but they do have a fairly large book collection that we also keep here in the library, which does circulate, which is great. So people can request it from around the country. But in the past 2 years or so, there's been a new energy in the organization, which has been fantastic. They want to increase their outreach. They want to work on digitizing more items to make available to the public. And because of this increased interest and motivation for outreach, the additions coming into the archives here at UWSP have ballooned because they've started really reaching out to find primary sources, secondary sources to support their mission, and they've been accessioned here at Stevens Point. Next slide, please. So first I'm going to talk about the original digitization project from the smaller collection before the collection ballooned here. Like I said, it was only 6 boxes. I estimated about 1,000 pages per box. Now to digitize, I used 2 different types of scanners. I use an automatic feed and a flatbed scanner. Now, the automatic feed might raise some eyebrows out there, especially if there's people that worked in archives. And it's true, it's not a popular mode for digitization. But what we found here on campus is that with coronavirus hitting, people not being on campus, but still needing access to archival records, was that it took way too much time to digitize using just flatbed scanner. Now, of course, I don't promote anybody using an automatic feed scanner for fragile records, for one-of-a-kind records. What I used it for in the collection was mostly photocopies of newspaper articles, things that are duplicated elsewhere, but are in this collection because they support, the information. So it's important to know that snags will happen, pages will get ripped. It happened to me during this project, but it's a simple fix because it's not one of a kind. You take out the jam, you make a photocopy, which creates a nice new copy, and you scan the new copy. And you can either keep the original for provenance or throw it away and you have a fresh copy. Like I said, anything fragile, one of a kind, very old, we use the flatbed scanner, and we also use the flatbed for photos exclusively, of course. And I put the type of scanners down there just in case people are interested. It's important to note that the automatic feed, it does of course have rollers to feed the paper through, but it's not the type that feeds it over and then under, it just shoots it straight through. So it is a little safer, but of course, as most of you know, not ideal for archival work. So for the documents, those were all scanned at grayscale, 300 DPI PDFs, and then we OCR'd them so people can search by text. We did the DPI because 300 is generally plenty to make a document legible, and we of course didn't want huge file sizes. The photographs, on the other hand, we scanned them as either color or grayscale, depending on what the photo was. And we scanned those at 600 DPI TIFFs because we wanted kind of preservation copies of an uncompressed file. A lot of people, if you're scanning photos, you're going to come across a problem of space, download times online, things like that. So if you want a smaller file, you can always shrink it down from a TIFF. You can create a 300 DPI JPEG from the TIFF, but you want kind of that preservation copy because you don't want to have to go back in the future and redo your work. This way you're doing it once, getting it done. So those 6 boxes, after I was all said and done, I came to 1.6 gigabytes of file size for 207 files. And I worked on this alone, and it took me about 80 hours to complete. Next slide, please. After they were digitized, the documents went on Preservica. This is our digital preservation platform that we use on campus. So this is for everything campus related. And on the left, you can see that's the organization, kind of the broader organization by collection. And there's also a search box at the top, so you can search by keyword, which is going to search all the files, of course, or you can limit down by just clicking on a selection if you know what type of collection it's going to be in. So once you choose the collection, on the right side, you'll see the Forest History collection is organized by box number. Included is also going to be a finding aid on Preservica. So if you're looking for a certain topic that way, instead of by a keyword search, you can find the box it's in and then click on the box. Next slide, please. And this is what a folder list looks like on Preservica within each box. I'm not sure which box number this is. That doesn't really matter. So it's going to give you the title of the folder, which is going to correspond with the finding aid, which is also on here. And then you can click on the folder title. And next slide, please. and you're going to get your primary sources that were scanned in. And this is just an example. This is one folder, and you can see at the top, this is page 4 of 125 pages within one folder. So this is just kind of a run-of-the-mill example of what it would look like if you go in here. Next slide, please. So like I said, this is just the start of, or I only started the digitization project. There's 24 boxes to go since all the accessions we've received over time. We of course need to scan and OCR all of those. We scan them in order, like I showed. We do each box, we do each folder within the box. But there's another caveat to this project, because we're also kind of preparing for National History Day. So we're creating kind of separate folders by subject or by name. So as we go through and digitize the whole collection, we're making copies of folders or subjects and setting it aside kind of as little packets for National History Day researchers. And I estimate to finish the project, it's going to be about 350 hours of work, which is considerably more than the 80 I already put in, which kind of brings us to the fantastic resource of internships and using them in the future to get projects like this done. Next slide, please. So if there's questions, I think that's a good place to stop, right? And we can address anything. I think there were some in the chat down there.
Yeah, there were a couple of questions, Brad. If you have any suggestions for OCR software and prices for those, and also what are the costs for Preservica?
For OCR, I use Adobe Acrobat. I don't know the cost of it. It's an institutional software, of course, here on campus. Preservica is expensive. It's around $10,000 a year subscription. I want to point out it's not used as a user side software normally. It's for preservation, so it runs checksums automatically. It adds robust metadata. It's those types of things. They're actually working on the user side of it to make it more user-friendly, because they're learning that institutions like us at Stevens Point, if we're spending that much money, to store the digital files, we also want it to be user-friendly for discovery. So it's not really a cost-effective software for many places, but it works really good for our situation.
Brad, can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
What do you all use for access? Like if somebody comes into your reading room at UW Stevens Point, is there a software that you use for them to be able to look at digital materials?
We have a couple different ways. So we have Preservica, which is kind of our official repository. They can, of course, you can log, there's a user interface on the web, and you can just log or just click right into it from there. So we might get it to them that way, but we also have it on our personal websites. We have kind of a digital collection section, and they can click on, let's say, yearbooks, for example, and look at them that way. We have a YouTube channel as well, so as many videos as we've been able to digitize are available on there. But it's all a work in progress. A lot of people that come into the reading room are still interested in looking at paper records and the hard copy of things. So we're really pushing the digital to distance students that can't be on campus, maybe genealogy researchers or alumni who live in Texas, things like that. So yeah, we're trying to provide access to all types of people.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Brad? Well, I'm going to kick in here, but before I do, I guess I'd like to make a few comments about a lot of the insightful things Brad had shared. First of all, those standards for recording documents and scanning are so valuable. I can tell you that one of the most frustrating things we've had to do at the Manitowish Waters Historical Society is to back up to go forward again because images were scanned in low resolution, not saved properly. And then when you do a formal project, your publishers send it back to you and say, we need something better. And you may not have access to those. So I really recommend following those protocols just as he described. Another thing that was asked was the archival software and the cost that Brad and UWSP has is a lot. But there's a free resource out there called Omeka that I have used as a resource that is fantastic. At the Manitowish Waters Historical Society, we use Past Perfect. And, we're a community of 600 people and it can work within our price range. And the Wisconsin Historical Society has grants to help affiliate organizations to that end. Janet Seymour could talk about that, but there's some good sources for little historical societies like ours to be successful. That being said, any questions on my comments before we jump into National History Day? Okay, hearing none. Well, I was a teacher for 34 years and I participated in National History Day. And as we were working at the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, we were going to try to make real and meaningful linkages with students to share the great stories of Wisconsin forestry. And Brad, as he had described, was doing amazing work on digitizing the archives and moving those into a digital format. So I was tasked with the challenge of seeing how best to get our work in front of students. And so I'm going to go over what National History Day is and the exciting prospects that we found at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse and the work of Pat Stovey. For those of you who don't know, National History Day is one of the most popular academic history programs in the United States, and it is very, very strong in Wisconsin. It is divided into two categories. There is a junior division, 6th through 8th grade, and a senior division, 9 through 12. Pat Stovey, who we are working with, and in her goals with her friendly finding aid that she's built exclusively for National History Day, she tries to target an 8th grade audience whenever she builds her archives and believes that's the best way to go. And so we're going to go on this journey and kind of guide it through Pat Stovey's fine work at UW La Crosse and talk about some possibilities in the future. I think it's important to include that we're at the beginning of this effort and that Brad is collaborating closely with all of that. And as he said in his presentations, he is doing his archiving with an eye on connecting with Pat in what will hopefully be a grand collaboration. Next slide, please. So our on-ramp as historical societies is the conducting research phase, which is really quite important. We have a wealth of primary sources and secondary sources that we are going to be digitizing. That's the purpose of these fairs and a lot of the efforts at Recollection Wisconsin. And if we can create an on-ramp, to use that metaphor, for even little historical societies like mine and Manitowish Waters or bigger ones, this could be a great way to connect our histories and empower teachers and students. And this is one of the most difficult elements as a practitioner within National History Day. Next slide, please. So Pat, using a grant, created her friendly finding aid. and it operates out of the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, and it's really quite spectacular. I think I want to go back and share that. Remember, her target audience is for 8th graders. And so it's not like your super high-end gifted 12th grader who's going to do the most remarkable work on researching something. This is to empower teachers, who might have 30 junior high kids in the room at one time, trying to put together a project simultaneously. And I think Brad and I agree, Pat is really onto something with her format and the way it operates. So if you'll look at the yellow arrow on the left, and that stays up all the time, they have the subjects all listed out there that Pat is linking her primary and secondary sources to help in the research phase that I described earlier for National History Day. In doing this, one of the things Pat wanted to do, which is really pragmatic from a teacher's point of view, she wanted to create a pathway in which when kids come back the next day to class, they'll know exactly how to get back where they started the day before. 30 questions of how do I do this to a teacher is really quite problematic at the start of a class. So if we can have the next slide, please. The friendly finding aid kind of works like this. If you look at the image in the left-hand side, the yellow arrow goes to that subject, and then it pops up into those categories that Brad is creating at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point of people and topics, big buckets in which, ideas and concepts can fall in, and then kids can follow that trail deeper into the archival search and try to learn more. So if they pick, for instance, people, if you look at the slide on the right with the yellow arrow on people, it would then illuminate who happens to be in the environmental friendly finding aid. So we're going to click on Alvin Peterson just because he was an interesting fellow. Next slide, please. And here we jump in and we see all those boxes with the yellow arrow in the upper left-hand corner that Brad was illustrating for us. And many of these boxes are still in paper form. And the notion is, before COVID, that kids would go in there and get their hands on these documents and learn the protocols and alike. And the green arrow below, again, shows the linkages and tells the kids just how to get there. You can kind of follow a flow chart or a map here for students, and it's really quite good. If you scroll further down on the page, we go to the collection summary report, and then they summarize each of those boxes. And that's also helpful, kind of leading a trail of academic breadcrumbs for our students to go and find the source. And again, to be able to create connection from each day in class. And I think the collection summary and the box descriptions are some of the strongest linkages from my view as a practitioner and a National History Day teacher. The See Also file is really the area at the very bottom of the slide we're looking at, where I think we can kind of get a connection with our digital collections. We're going to jump from Alvin Peterson here and look at some of the other collections that Pat has put together and then look at some of her digital offerings. Next slide, please. So under the See Also portion of it, you can see these digital collections, this one from the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, the Murphy Library, and all of those are scanned in there with small thumbnail screenshots of the front page. And if the whole page is there, you could scroll down. And what's nice about all of this is that it's also searchable. So somebody can open up a PDF, put in a keyword, and do research much faster than I did back in the day when I took my master's degree in the 1980s. So this is really quite an encouraging leap, and probably in our prototypes and discussions with Pat Stovey at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse that hosts the Friendly Finding Aid, and with Brad on how we would be building our linkages going forward. Next slide, please. Now, importantly, Pat and her friendly finding aid does other linkages like the Ada James collection. She uses the amazing resources at the University of Wisconsin and their digital collection series. You can see with the yellow arrow on the lower left-hand side, there's an absolute link where to go and get these collections that already exist. Let me say this. Many of the collections that you would probably want to target for National History Day, and logically, other elements of your historical society are probably already archived somewhere else, and you want to be careful not to duplicate that. And if we can go to the next slide to see the Ada James papers, there is the UW collections right there in the upper corner with the yellow arrow, and it is a treasure trove. I use this all the time. Importantly, students can use it effectively as well. And when clicking on it, you can see the document on Wisconsin women's suffrage below, kind of like the document that Brad had showcased previously. Excuse me. So these are really good resources and good linkages. And as we go into questions, I've gone through a lot here, but we're going to pause, field your questions. And we're showing how a small historical organization like the Forest History Association of Wisconsin can work with numerous UWs to not only archive, but then to create linkages to students. So that's quite a bit. And I think I'll let Brad and I just kind of answer your questions as you may have them.
And just to add to the conversation a little bit, this is Kristen. I'd love to hear if other organizations or historical societies, your experiences with National History Day and how any of what Brad and Jim are talking about might inform the way you work with National History Day students.
Well, I see that some are chiming in about how their children have enjoyed National History Day and actually gone to the state competitions. I have had that journey as well. I had a team actually make it to nationals in Washington, D.C., and it is quite an amazing experience for those students and the educators. I think that some of you may not know how you would fit in this process. So let's say, and I didn't want to get into everything on National History Day, but they have a theme every year. And based on that theme, they're actively looking for local documents. They actually get points on a rubric that scores those award-winning projects. And if they have good primary sources, good secondary sources, good local resources, and so on. And you have those in your collections, and those will fit nicely with the themes that are launched every year. So you might think, well, this would be a real reach for our organization to actually put anything in Pat's friendly finding aid. And the truth of the matter is, really what they want for National History Day is exactly what's in your collections. All righty. Since we don't have any other feedback,
Actually, Jim?
Yes.
This is Michelle in the Crandon. We did have a question. Do you know if other UW system archives are using the friendly finding aid as well, or is it mostly just the La Crosse archives at this point?
I believe it's Pat at the La Crosse Archives, the hubs for National History Day outside of the Historical Society in Madison, is Stevens Point, La Crosse, and Green Bay. And there are connections there and people on staff. So for this group representing the northern tier of the state of Wisconsin, we kind of have that foundation under us for outreach, and we can also go to Madison. As far as the friendly finding aid, I believe this is almost exclusively Pat's program. She does this with her classes and has her kids contribute to this work at the UW. Now, Pat has been wonderful and super supportive, but she is on sabbatical right now and is still working with us, but working on numerous professional projects.
Kristen, can you hear me?
I can, I think,
This-
probably. Hello.
This is
I think
hi. This is Liz Arbuckle. I'm sorry. I've been trying to talk. I've had
that's
some.
okay,
I've
but
had
everybody can hear you too. So I'm gonna.
fantastic.
Okay, one
I
moment.
just-
Just okay. Stop. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
No, I'm fine. I'm ready to field questions. I threw that out as an observation.
Okay, got it. I'm sorry, Liz. I thought you were trying to talk to me about your presentation that was coming up. Okay, go ahead. My apologies.
Oh no, I was just going to chime in because I do NHD work for the society. So I just wanted to chime in that next year's theme, as was stated earlier, we have themes every year, is debate and diplomacy in history. And they create these themes to be pretty wide, very, very wide, but yet still around some kind of theme. So I think what's great, particularly about this, is all politics are local, right? As Tip O'Neill said. And so debate and diplomacy will be great at the local level, state level, national level. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity for LHAs to get involved with NHD and help local kids learn more about their region, learn more about their local history, and do something different. And the judges would love to see something different. It would be wonderful. So anyway, so that's all I wanted to add to that conversation a little bit. I could talk a little bit more about the different fairs. We've talked a little bit about La Crosse. Of course, Minocqua has one, as well as Stevens Point, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Madison, and Eau Claire. So they're all around the state. Some are bigger than others. Minocqua is definitely our smallest one, but we're always looking for judges in the area. It'll be great when we're back in person. We also always need judges in Stevens Point, if someone would be willing to kind of drive down for that. So those are some neat opportunities to connect with the kids, especially when you're in person. To be a judge can be very rewarding. I think the plus side of this year being online was that you could be a judge from your living room, right? So we got people from, Madeline Island can be judging and never leave the island. And so we've got a nice opportunity for the judges to get involved. The downside was they didn't get to talk to the kids face to face. And that's always the exciting part about History Day, is that the day of the event, the kids are by their exhibits, or they've keyed up their documentary or something, and it's just such a wonderful experience for the judges to talk to the kids about, well, why'd you choose this and what'd you find interesting, and for the kids to get to share, because they've been working on this for months. So it's neat that they get to have that connection. So that's just a little plug to, if you want to consider or think about being a judge, we'd sure love to have you. And you can absolutely get in touch with me or any of my colleagues at NHD through WHS. So I didn't want to take up the whole time on NHD, but I did just want to make that little plug. So thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. That was very helpful. And I kind of stuck to the archival thread of National History Day and our efforts, because you can go online on National History Day. There are videos that are YouTube based, and there are documents and all sorts of scaffold learning resources for kids. And if you review those, you can really see how there's nice matches between our local archival records and the outcomes that they're after. Also, the theme of debate and diplomacy with the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, there was a great deal of debate on how to manage forests, particularly at the beginning of the 20th century. And things became really quite combative between agricultural interests in the Northwoods that was going to turn northern Wisconsin into a dairy area with silos and big farms like Dane County, and the foresters who believed that that was not sustainable or feasible. And it led to a lot of anxiety, and ultimately our top forester being pushed out of his position by 1915. But by the 1920s, we see that there's a lot of diplomacy that comes in, and there's a realignment between agricultural interests and forestry interests that's sustained to today. So that's just one example how our little historical group, the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, fits nicely to this year's theme. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? Hearing none, we'll try the next slide, please. Okay, this is really quite important, and I spoke of it earlier. When you're doing your archiving, you have to really do some serious research before you begin a big project to make sure that information isn't already linked and online, which would make your work so much easier. I have an example here from my work, which is turning into a new Northern Highland American Legion Forest interpretive trail with 23 interpretive signs. I found these CCC newspapers from Camp Mercer, right on the Iron County, Vilas County line, available with all the super insightful information. And I got that basically downloaded from a source from the University of Michigan. And I built a web page. We archived all of it. Next slide, please. It took a lot of time, but it was central to our effort. Then a year later, here it is. See the yellow arrows? All but one copy of what I have archived is online. Now, this didn't exist previous to my efforts and all the hours and money and server space we put into it, but here it's all available. And it's available for many CCC camps throughout the state of Wisconsin. So by linking to existing resources and using those to guide people from your historical society will save you so much time and money. I think Brad has some stories you might want to share about that as well.
Yeah, we came across the same issue. It was genealogy records, actually. And we had actually started the project of digitizing, I think the collection was a couple hundred boxes, and I got about 6 boxes into it, and come to find out that they were already on Family Search. And for those of you who are genealogists are well aware at how much work they put into digitizing genealogy records. So I had started the project and it was already done. So we had wasted our students' time, our time, other resources. And in the end, all we have to do is link to it. And we also had that happen with naturalization records. We were about to start a very large project and discovered they were already done. So I can attest to the importance of scouring the internet as much as you can before starting a major project, because I'm sure many of you know it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of man hours or woman hours. It's a huge waste of time if you put it in and then find out it's already somewhere else.
I think back to the earlier session, it'd be helpful to include in the project plan checklist this strong review of existing resources. They, you know, Kristen and her team have put that together, and Recollection Wisconsin, you know, suggests that you do that. And, you know, some of us want to just jump into a project and do things to get at it. But you really have to do your due diligence on this element, in my opinion. So go to the next slide. You click on one of those links and there are all of those Mercer monitors all ready for you and done. And that would have saved me 40, 50 hours. Next slide, please. And this is the great resource that you get. You know, I really love the old masthead at the top. This is a great one for National History Day to link to this. And then on the far right, you know, you see the lower column, you know, what the rangers tell us. Forest rangers drove many of the CCC camps projects and directed them in really saving our forests and some of the great outcomes of the CCC, which defines the North Woods. And I already told you about, you know, the theme for National History Day. So you have these linkages, but you can do it the hard way or you can do it the easy way. I recommend easy. Next slide, please. And I think Brad's going to talk about his intern experience and the importance of interns going forward. But before we jump there, anything about what Brad and I just talked about in the power of linking? Take it away, Brad.
All right. So we have to get the work done, right? We have to digitize our records and we can't all do it ourselves. We don't have time. What has become integral at the UWSP campus and which can be helpful at historical societies and anywhere else are interns. On campus here, we always have students looking to get internships. They need experience. They need job experience before they go out. And they're not only looking to work on campus here. Students can work for other organizations from campus. And it's a great symbiotic relationship because we or you get the work out of them, you know, to get the project done, but they also gain very important real world skills, digitizing skills, and maybe archiving skills. Next slide, please. So specifically on campus here for the forest history project we're working on, it is a paid internship that we're doing. So it's through the history department because they are going to get class credit for it. It is funded by the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, but it's actually performed here in the archives. So there's a lot of moving parts with the internship, which is good for everybody involved. We're expecting one intern per semester, and we figure they get 150 hours of work per semester. That's 10 hours a week for 15 weeks, which is usually about the most a college student is willing to work outside of, you know, their normal school work. And as I said, they get class credit, which is a great bonus. I know in the history department, I believe it's a new requirement that they do some sort of internship or real world experience before graduating. So this helps towards that. The interns also get experience with archival collections. They get some minimal experience with organization, processing, preservation, things like that as they work through these collections. And they also learn digitization techniques. They learn standards. They learn how workflows work, how to be the most efficient, things like that. So of course we get a very large benefit from having them work here on these projects. And they also bring their own skills. Students today are way more tech savvy than I was when I was in college. I'm only 41, but they are leaps and bounds ahead of my knowledge many times. So they teach us stuff and like I said, bring different perspectives. I mean, we have kind of this way of doing things, but they're more tech savvy. They're online more. They might know how people want to search for things differently. So it's important to listen to the interns and use all the skills that they bring. Next slide, please.
I think I'm up now. And I believe there's a blow up of this that we'll put up after I make my comments on the yellow arrows. Again, I am the president of the Manitowish Waters Historical Society. We are a small historical society. We formally started in November of 2015. So we're a fledgling group and are dedicated largely to promoting digital collections. And so that makes us a little different than some of the people who are viewing currently. But I think we all share the backlog of digitization of items. And Manitowish Waters, I indicated that we had a 130-year backlog of our history, and we're going to start to work on it. We tried to work with volunteers, we did outreach, we tried to do training, but I'm going right back to what Brad said. When it comes to developing higher order digitizing skills, and that means beyond scanning. You can teach a lot of people to scan, but the metadata and the building of different platforms, it really does become challenging. So the first thing that we have on our job description, and I'm going to tell you how we got our interns and how they are revolutionizing things around our historical society this year. I gave a little overview of who we are. The next arrow, I went through the duties that we want them to complete. This might be helpful if you guys are ever going to get interns. Then I have their requirements, and this is really quite important. And then the pay rate. You know, in talking with Brad, I asked, what do I need to pay an undergraduate student? And he said, higher than what they recommend at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. And we came up with $14 an hour. That worked out very well. And we had one undergrad full-time intern. And then we had 3 part-time graduate interns, and working with a person in the art history program at St. Thomas University in the Twin Cities, they recommended $18 an hour. So we started fundraising this year for the purposes of gaining money to hire interns and to move this forward. Next slide, please. The way we did this is interesting. We reached out to the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and to St. Thomas, and we had no hits. So we found a free way to get a candidate pool of 60 candidates in 1 week. We use something called Indeed for employers. This is a really powerful tool. Our communication director at the Manitowish Waters Historical Society is also the head of the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber was hiring people, and we just used their practices. Next slide, please. So it's free. You set this thing up with no cost online. And I can tell you, a lot of the tech savvy people who are looking for jobs are using these platforms to get jobs. So you kind of get right to the folks who have the skill set you need. Next slide. So we partnered with the local Chamber of Commerce and the town of Manitowish Waters to do everything, to use their Indeed account to set up the payment for our interns, and they handled all of it so we didn't have a big IRS hassle. It was really a cooperative thing from a town of, like I said, under 600 people. Next slide, please. And Indeed delivers the credentials from the students to you. You can communicate with candidates individually and by block. And when we were done, we went down to about a dozen candidates to interview. all the interviews were done on Zoom, and we actually had to postpone all of our interviews because of a glitch that happened. And we only lost one candidate. They re-upped and came back on Zoom with no time lost whatsoever. I was just floored by the flexibility that we had by using Indeed and Zoom. So our early results from our interns, off-site interns I'll never see, are so impressive. We had like 25 videos that had been recorded since the 1980s on VHS. They took all those videos, they transferred all those videos, they captioned all those videos, and then they loaded them onto YouTube for us. Next slide, please. So as we go, let's go back one slide, actually, I'm sorry. And one more slide back. I think I skipped one. Nope, go forward. Well, what I left out of here is we also had a free service for our, YouTube is free, but we also used a $50 service called Screencast-O-Matic, in which you can take videos and have your own editor provided through that, so you don't have to spend $100 for a video editor, let's say through Adobe Premiere or something like that. I think that might be in the brag deck that'll come later. So any questions about interns for Brad and I and the interviewing process that we used at Manitowish Waters?
I will say real quick, we do pay them, but it's not unheard of to do unpaid internships. A lot of students are extremely, I don't want to say desperate, but they really need to get experience before they fill out a resume and things like that. So if you're an extremely small organization with very little money to put towards something like this, it's still worth putting it out there that you have an opportunity for students.
Jim, really quick, also in chat, Nancy had asked, how are you funding these positions at your organization?
Right. We fundraised all across our community specifically for interns because we had tried to use volunteers to do the archiving we needed, and we just couldn't do it. We couldn't create critical mass in our community with the skill sets necessary to do the kind of work that's being described here. So pragmatically, you need to get young people engaged and involved, and then you put that media out there and more young people get involved. So it has this multiplying effect. But we had 2 individuals in our community lead a fundraising drive, and we have raised enough money to do this for 2.5 years and pay 2 full-time interns, and we're directing our money there. This is just pure pragmatism. Every time you get $20 that goes toward this, so you can pay one of your interns for an hour of work, it's saving me at least 2 hours of work because they're just faster and better at it. And really, even though there's a big group of baby boomers like me, I'm 63. I'm not young like Brad. There's a lot of us, but we don't have the skill set. And those individuals are very protective of their time. And a lot of others are seeking the volunteer time of retirees as well. So it just was the way we had to go to move large volumes of content to a digital level. Any other questions? So basically, we're moved ahead probably by our internship this year, 1 or 2 years than if we hadn't had interns. And when you think of it that way, a time versus money for scarce resources, people will see the importance of that. And they also like the fact that we're hiring young individuals to do this work and bringing youthful interest into our historical societies. All right, we're on the last page here. These are our final thoughts real quick. We're going to go over them, and you guys can chime in or make comments if you wish. Digital archiving continues to grow. This is not something that's going to go away or fade. This is our new normal. No thoughts on that?
Well, I will absolutely attest to this. As a university archivist, we very rarely get paper documents sent to us anymore. There's been an absolute shift in the last 5 years from paper to digital. So we have to get used to it, and we have to deal with it.
As you look at the second bullet, we have Recollection Wisconsin is leading the way for groups like historical societies to digitally archive. I cannot say enough about the work that has been done thus far by Recollection Wisconsin. And hopefully they can continue to lead and guide us in the future and facilitate outreach through things like the friendly finding aid of Pat Stovey, and build from there, and help us so we don't make those mistakes of putting things online that are already out there. Any other thoughts on that point? Hearing none, collaborating, sharing, and exploring best practice will benefit your historical society. That's what you're doing today. And that's what I hope you'll be doing in the future. I can tell just by meeting Brad a year ago and working through the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, it has grown my insights, my access to historical content, and incorporating best practices dramatically. And that's what you get when you collaborate and you share. And it's a pretty friendly group out there. So I encourage you to get involved.
I've never had a bad collaboration. I've worked with a lot of groups. You always get something out of it, and it's nice to help. Everybody has a different wheelhouse, and sharing makes everybody better.
Okay, that pretty much concludes our work today. And
All right.
we hope you found it helpful.
Thank you.
very much. Thank you, Jim and Brad. We really appreciate it. Now it's time for another break. So before, please feel free to stick around or stretch your legs. We'll meet back here in 10 minutes, so 11:10, to hear from the Wisconsin Historical Society's local history outreach program. Does that work for the timeline for everybody? 10 minutes?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you again, Jim and Brad. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks.